wind howled like a hungry wolf across the port of Piraeus. Sailors, hardened by years at sea, huddled in taverns, trading stories over cheap wine. It was on a night like this, thick with the smell of salt and impending storms, that the wager was made. A challenge, born from pride, and maybe just a touch of madness, was thrown down. One man, Petros Arapakis, accepted it without hesitation. The stakes were impossibly high. Not for gold, not for glory survival itself. He would sail a treacherous route, a journey most considered a death sentence. Petros Arapakis was a legend long before this fateful wager. He hailed from the island of Hydra, a place that bred sailors as naturally as it grew olives. From a young age, he showed an uncanny connection to the sea. He could feel a shift in the wind before it was registered on any instrument. He could sense the pull of a hidden current just by the way the ship groaned beneath his feet. His father and his grandfather were sailors, and their stories of monstrous waves and distant exotic lands were his bedtime stories. The ocean was in his blood, a calling he could not ignore. He wasn't a man who simply worked on the sea. He was a part of it, as much as any dolphin or albatross. His reputation was built on a foundation of impossible feats. He had once navigated his small fishing boat through a freak waterspout that had terrified larger vessels into fleeing. Another time, he had rescued the crew of a sinking cargo ship during a winter gale, diving into the freezing water himself to pull men from the wreckage. These acts were not done for praise, but out of a deep-seated instinct. He understood the sea's dual nature, its capacity for serene beauty and its potential for sudden, devastating violence. The terms of the wager were brutally simple, leaving no room for error. Petros's hands were to be lashed to the ship's wheel with thick, coarse rope. The knots were tied by the rival captain himself, ensuring they were tight and could not be easily undone. He would be bound from the moment the ship left the harbor until it successfully rounded the Cape of Daggers and reached the safe waters of the next port. He could not eat. He could not sleep. He could not move from his post for any reason. He would become the living, breathing rudder of the Nereus, forced to feel every shudder of the ship, every slap of the waves, as if it were happening to his own body. This was not a test of sailing. It was a test of pure, raw endurance. The danger was immense and multifaceted. The primary threat was, of course, the sea itself. The Cape of Daggers was infamous for its confused seas, where waves came from multiple directions at once, crashing over the deck and threatening to swamp the vessel. Submerged rocks, like the teeth of a great sea monster, lay just beneath the surface, ready to rip the hull open. A sudden gust of wind could slam the ship towards these hazards in an instant. Bound to the wheel, Petros could only steer. He was a brain without a body, reliant entirely on his crew to execute his commands perfectly and instantly. The first day was a grueling test of stamina. Petros stood like a statue, his eyes fixed on the horizon, his voice calm and steady as he issued commands. 2 points to starboard, his crew would scramble to adjust the rigging. "Hold her steady now, lads." The sun beat down on him, and the sea spray kept him perpetually soaked and cold, but he did not flinch. His body ached, and the ropes were already cutting into his wrists, but his will was a fortress. He was a master at work, conducting the orchestra of the ship with nothing but his voice and the subtle shifts of his bound hands on the wheel. As they approached the Cape of Daggers, the sky turned a bruised purple. The sea grew angry. The waves, which had been playful slaps, turned into furious punches, slamming against the hull of the Nereus. Rain began to fall, first as a drizzle, then as a blinding torrent. The wind shrieked through the rigging, a sound that could unravel the nerves of even the most seasoned sailor. Petros's crew, though terrified, held fast, their faith in their captain absolute. They worked in perfect sync, their movements fluid and efficient despite the chaos. The true climax arrived in the dead of night. A rogue wave, a monstrous wall of black water, rose up out of the darkness. It was larger than anything they had ever seen, a liquid mountain intent on swallowing them whole. "Hard to port! All hands brace!" He used his entire body, straining against his bonds, to wrench the wheel, turning the ship's bow just enough to meet the wave at a glancing angle rather than head-on. It was a moment of pure, primal survival. The wave crashed over the ship with the force of an explosion. Water surged across the deck, sweeping away crates, sweeping away barrels. Men clung to the masts and railings for dear life. For a terrifying moment, the Nereus was completely submerged, and it seemed she would never surface. But Petros's last-second maneuver had saved them. The ship shuddered, groaned, and then, miraculously, broke through to the surface, shedding water like a surfacing whale. After the rogue wave, the worst was over. The storm began to subside as they cleared the Cape of Daggers. As the sun rose on the third day, the crew looked upon their captain with a reverence usually reserved for gods. He was slumped against the wheel, his body exhausted and broken, but his eyes were still sharp, his spirit undimmed. The ropes had rubbed his wrists raw, leaving deep, bloody wounds. He had not slept or eaten for over 50 hours. When the Nereus limped into the safety of the next port, a crowd had already gathered. As Petros's rival captain, pale-faced and humbled, came aboard to cut the ropes, a hush fell over the onlookers. The moment the ropes fell away, Petros collapsed onto the deck, his body finally surrendering to the ordeal. His crew rushed to his side, but he waved them away, pushing himself back to his feet.